Okay, if you're here for the briefing hour, you've landed in the right place. We're going to wait just another minute or so. We've got people still signing on, so just hang tight and we'll jump into the content here in about a minute. Okay, hello and welcome to Briefing Hours for Sales Leaders. We promise to be brief, bright, and bring it all to you in 19 minutes. Today, we're going to be delivering a crash course for boosting your sales leadership productivity. This is Will Brooks. I'm COO of the Brooks Group, and I'm joined today by Steve Hackett, one of our regional vice presidents of sales. Steve's been a driving force in the Brooks Group's growth for nearly 2 decades. Steve, thanks for joining us today.
Will, glad to be here. This topic today is one that hits home for anyone who's ever been charged with leading a sales force. With technology beating down your doors, just-in-time mentalities, and everyone looking for an immediate answer to their problems, how do you strike the balance between what needs to be done now and what can be eliminated? Leading a sales team, it ain't easy.
Amen.
And I think about a quote from an ancient philosopher named Lin Wu-Tang that all sales leaders should follow. And I like to share it with you. Besides the noble art of getting things done, there's a noble art of leaving things undone. The wisdom of life consists in the elimination of the non-essentials. And Will, when you and I talk about the role of a sales leader, the essentials and the non-essentials, that's a constant challenge for most sales leaders.
You know, that's a very powerful quote, Steve, and I think you're right. I mean, you know, in a sales leader role, and in full disclosure, actually here at the Brooks Group, I head up the sales department, so I can totally relate to what you just said, because here's the thing, in this type of role, it feels like there's so much to be done, and everything feels important. But my take on what you just shared with us is really, you got to boil it down to what we talk about as high-gain activities and focus on those areas.
So let's go in and just share with you 5 productivity-killing pitfalls that sales leaders face in their day-to-day work. Time is a limited asset, and the most important asset, really. So we need to be sure what we're spending the majority of our time on and what really matters, the high-gain activities, and less time on the things that cause the distractions or the productivity-killing pitfalls.
So productivity-killing pitfalls, man, that's a mouthful. Steve, what do you mean by that?
These are the traps that are easy for any sales leader to fall into. But if they're aware of them and get disciplined about them, they really aren't too difficult to avoid. Here are 4 key questions that I think most sales leaders need to ask themselves in order to determine whether or not they're spending their time with those high-gain productivity activities. So the 4 questions are: what must happen? What is the priority? How much time is required? And what is the payoff? If you use these as the activity test, the answer generally is revealed to you.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so these are really the guideposts you'd say for helping me understand where I need to be spending my time.
Absolutely.
Awesome. That's good stuff. Let's jump into the pitfalls now.
Pitfall number 1, parachuting in on every qualified opportunity. Will, we find that most managers, sales managers, they want to know about the numbers every week, every month, this quarter. So they're constantly hitting the sales team and jumping in on every one of these qualified opportunities.
Yes, especially if we're behind the number, right, Steve? I mean, then the manager's under pressure, so he or she's going to want to dive into every deal, especially if the deal looks like it's getting sideways. And he or she may actually need to close it so that they can hit the number.
And for all you sales leaders out there, you're always behind the number, aren't you?
Every quarter.
So how can we fix it? You need to track the leading indicators and intervene only when necessary. Hire competent salespeople and train them well. Coach salespeople and let them fly on their own. And I think there's a misconception here that most sales leaders will also fall into, in thinking that their best people don't want your time, they don't need your activities, they don't want your thoughts, just leave them alone. And nothing could be further from the truth.
Absolutely. I mean, and I fell into that trap for a long time, but it turns out, in my experience, top reps, they're looking to grow even more. And so, there needs to be time spent coaching, there. I will say this too. I mean, in a way, while, parachuting in and closing deals for reps, there is a short-term gain there in the form of additional revenue that might have gone away. But quite frankly, you're inhibiting your growth, because the more you disempower these folks and do their jobs for them, the less capable they're going to be to grow on their own and become more self-sufficient. At least that's been my experience.
Agreed. But knowing when to intervene, when they could use that assistance, that's a critical skill set for most sales leaders.
Exactly. And I like, the hiring competent salespeople. We know that's a moving target at all points in time. So, all of this is kind of predicated on having the right talent in the seats. And, we know that's a tough nut to crack.
And again, tracking leading indicators. What are your leading indicators? What have you determined to be the leading indicators for your environment, your sales environment, and making sure that people all know those on the sales team?
Boom. Let's go to pitfall 2.
Being a prisoner in your inbox. I think, Will, you probably have a comment or two about that.
Yes. This is a topic that's kind of been beaten to death over the years. I mean, it's really a time management topic, but I think for sales leaders, it becomes even more of a challenge, because you've got reps pushing deals over to evaluate, maybe if you're having to police margins in your inbox. And so it just feels like you can't really get away. So, we got a couple tips here, but I think it boils down to staying organized. So maybe you want to talk to us a little bit about this.
Sure. One fix it could be just organizing your email into a system that works for you. We hear many sales leaders say, I'm going to look at my email from this time to this time, and then I'm going to blank it out for the next 3 hours. And then I'll come back in at another time later on in the afternoon. So it's being disciplined with your schedule and not fall into the activity trap of looking at every email like it's something that has to be done that minute. So organizing your time around that.
Key word is discipline. And I'm going to tell you, especially with the phone buzzing in your pocket all the time, and, oh man, could this be a contract that just came in and we're behind the number and I just need to interrupt what I'm doing and check my email? Like that's certainly a reality, and it's a challenging one at that, but I think that's about discipline.
If you dedicate a specific time to check your email, you need to make sure that your team, your sales team, understands not to expect an immediate response to something, especially when it's not time that you're even going to be looking or entertaining those emails. Share and communicate that with your team.
So that goes to point 3 there, the alternate communication method for, quote unquote emergencies, right? So a rep sends you an email and he or she doesn't hear back, and maybe this is something that truly does need your attention. I think for me, I use text, right? So Steve, you and the rest of the folks here know that if there's something that truly needs my attention, you all can text me or call me if you need me. But email is really, that's for the day in, day out things that can wait.
And you've communicated that with us, so we understand that is the preferred way of communication for these emergencies. So we talked about setting up alternative communication for your team for emergencies. Maybe it is that text. Maybe it is a direct phone call. Maybe it is physically getting up and walking next door to see your manager if it's something that's really pressing. But make sure it's really pressing.
Well, and I'll tell you just a point that kind of came to my mind right now, too. I mean, I think there's something to be said for, working with reps to help them understand the kinds of things that can actually wait until a face-to-face one-to-one as well. So, a rep can kind of create a parking lot for himself or herself where, ideas or questions, they may be able to wait till the next meeting, and that will keep the inbox less cluttered as well.
Maybe turn down the volume so when that email comes in and clicks on, you're not being attracted to staring at your computer as it rings.
Right, and as far as the mobile device is concerned too, like I have to take it away from my body or else it's going to distract me. Oh, this is a good one too.
Pitfall number 3 is making yourself too available. Well, what do you think about that? How does that impact most sales leaders?
So I think that for a sales leader who is, aspiring to be a great leader, he or she may fall into that trap of wanting to be, hey, salespeople, I'm here for you whenever, wherever, I am here for you. And, in a sense, that does create a high level of trust. But, it's a double-edged sword because it almost creates, I don't want to say codependence, but maybe that's the right term here. So all of a sudden, if you are too available, you've got people coming to you all the time. And essentially, it may be that you become someone who's, in effect, doing their job for them.
Codependence is a good term to use, Will, because we actually will train people to, by making ourselves so available, we'll actually hinder their growth professionally.
Exactly. Now, there's a fine line, I think, between, not being available enough. Let's see the best way to say this. Like, you don't want to abdicate. You don't want to abandon your people and make them feel like they're on their own. But I do think that maybe making them just a little bit uncomfortable is a good thing, right? They're going to have to think on their feet. You can't just be there to make the decisions for them.
Well, you and I have had these conversations and working with many sales leaders. A good strategy here is, make yourself available. But if it's something that needs to be discussed, come with 2 or 3 suggestions.
Oh, yeah.
Do the analysis beforehand so that you can actually share what your thoughts are and not just always ask an opinion or pass it off to your sales leader. So here's a couple things to think about. Block off time on your calendars for getting things done. That's a hard thing for most sales leaders because most of the sales leaders that we deal with, they're so subservient to everyone else during the day. And then when everybody else leaves for the day, that's when they're doing their work. When I hear people up at 11 o'clock at night or working all weekends, that to me is just a very dysfunctional environment for sales leaders to maintain for long term.
Yeah, and that's exactly where I was going to go with. I mean, how sustainable is that? People want to believe they're Superman or Superwoman, but guess what? That's not going to last over the long term.
In time management, there's a structuring your blocks of time and then being disciplined about that. So if you're going to take a block of time, a consistent block of time in the morning, block it off and let everyone know that you're blocking it off so that you have the ability to do your job, not their job. And be disciplined about that on a daily basis, whatever that is, whether it's an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, you have to determine based upon what your business is like and what your responsibilities are. And communicate with your team what qualifies as an urgent, and again, I emphasize urgent interruption.
And that goes to the point we made on the previous pitfall slide about, the communication methods and so forth. So I think the text idea comes into play here. But again, I mean, the takeaway here is, again, I think it's about being disciplined with your time and communicating openly with your team about your preferences and what you need to be working on at any given point in time.
I know we're talking about sales leaders, but it's probably a pretty good tip for most salespeople as well.
Absolutely.
Number 4, scattering your one-to-one meetings. And the question becomes, how often should you have the one-to-one meetings?
Yes.
And what is it that you want to accomplish on those one-to-ones? So, Will, you're a big fan of this. Tell me what some of your thoughts.
Yeah, so we'll meet once a week here. I will personally meet with each RVP, and of course, we're talking about opportunities, we're talking about deals, we're talking about leads, and importantly too, we're talking about strategy. So those sessions are dedicated to those conversations. I think this slide is really about, spreading these one-to-ones across a week. And obviously this is all contingent upon how large your team is. But, I think where we're going with this slide is it's a good idea, at least I've found, to have all of your one-to-ones on one day if possible. And the reason is it, it puts you in the right frame of mind to focus on just that type of work during that day. So if at all possible, I think that's what we're talking about, Steve. But talk to us about the fixes as you see them.
Yeah, great point, Will. Schedule your meetings in chunks instead of scattering them. It's interesting when you have a block of time and you're doing your one-on-ones consistently, because there's different common themes that you may see within your whole sales team, or maybe there's operational issues or some other issues that you have.
It's a great point.
If I'm scattering them up over a week, I lose that thought and that potential thread or that issue.
Yeah, you miss the theme, right?
The theme. Keep the meeting structured and don't go over the set time. Ours are a half hour. Yours may be less, yours may be more, but a half hour is a pretty good time. And the basic layout of our meetings are, we'll spend about 10 minutes discussing opportunities. We'll talk about future opportunities for several minutes. And then we'll talk about some operational issues or delivery, or maybe there may be a little bit of coaching involved with some of our meetings. But the structure remains the same. We don't really need an agenda, but I would suggest early on, when you're first starting these one-on-ones, create an agenda for everyone to be prepared to discuss, to stay on schedule and on time.
And we'll have the funnel right there in front of us, right? So the various stages of impact, where are we with each opportunity? What are the next steps? And to your point, there's coaching there, thinking about, what questions could we ask of this person or that person to move the ball down the field?
I think this next one's a big one, Will. Schedule meetings outside of your personal in-focus time. If I'm worried about what I need to be doing, my in-focus time, I can't focus in on the purpose of having a one-to-one meeting. You want to alienate a sales team, be distracted, answer emails, answering phone calls, shuffling papers on your desk when you have this one-on-one with your sales team, and they're thinking on the other side of the desk, what the heck am I even doing here?
Yep.
I'm an afterthought.
Absolutely. And that does go to, don't be too available for your team, right? So we talked about that, but the time to be absolutely 100% present are in the one-to-ones. And Steve's right. The rep needs to feel like you're 100% focused. And so, hey, I will say this, sometimes I'm personally guilty, right? The phone's buzzing and, it can definitely be a distraction. So, put the phone across the office, don't shuffle the papers, be fully present. That's critical for this type of meeting.
Now, remember, for some of your newer salespeople, there may be a little bit more instruction going on, a little bit more coaching, so allow for that.
Different conversations than with the seasoned folks, for sure.
Yeah, and with the seasoned people, it's a different conversation. They want to talk about how you can support them. How could you eliminate obstacles that they may be facing? They're going to want to talk strategy on bigger deals, bigger opportunities, and they've earned that because they have that seasoned experience with you. So not all meetings are going to be the same depending on the experience level, but they're consistent.
Yep.
Number 5, holding meetings that aren't meeting worthy.
This is a challenge because we feel like we should meet, but should we really meet? Steve, so talk to us about that.
For all you sales leaders who have ever sat in a meeting and you looked at your watch about halfway through and said, what the heck am I doing here? And how am I ever going to save the next, this 30 minutes of my life that I've just dedicated to this meeting and came away with nothing? You can all relate to this.
Yeah, so now put yourself in the shoes of your reps who really don't want to be in the meeting. They want to be selling. Now you're dealing with that problem amplified.
Yeah. So how do we fix it? We fix it by only scheduling meetings that are 100% necessary. Meeting for meeting's sake is a waste of time and productivity, and those will be the killers. Keep meetings structured, brief, and on track. If you're going to have a structured meeting that is a meaningful meeting, make sure that you send out an agenda. Make sure people are prepared. They know what they need to bring with them to the meeting so that it can be a productive session. And here's the other question. We talked about the noble art of getting things done and not leaving things undone. If it can be covered in an email or a phone call, don't hold a meeting. Conference calls, technology allows us to be able to utilize short periods of time to accomplish things, productive things, without going through the formal structure of everybody blocking off schedules, rearranging schedules in order to attend a meeting.
I have a good friend and client of ours, Steve, and you'll know who I'm talking about when I mention this gentleman. But, kind of a tip he gave me years and years ago was, look, you're going to have to meet with your team about various things, but never have a meaningful gathering of your salespeople without discussing in some way, shape, or form some sort of sales skills development, right? So it's super easy to have a meeting around operational issues or scheduling or whatever all these kind of nuts and bolts tactical day-to-day issues look like. But when you're together, what a wonderful opportunity to focus on questioning skills or reading buyer types and all of that good stuff. So that was a really good tip that I try to keep in mind.
Extremely productive. And I'll add one more thing to it, Will. When sales leaders always are conducting the meetings. Sometimes it's just great to have the sales team take the lead on those sessions.
And by the way, that alleviates the pressure on the leader.
Absolutely.
All right, great. Well, we're up against the time here, Steve, but, I thought it was worthy of mentioning our sales management symposium. So, hopefully you've gotten something out of the 5 pitfalls and the associated tips we've given you, but I can tell you this, we have a great program, 2.5 days in length, where, we teach good tactical field sales management. So, of course, there is some information about time management and self-awareness and so forth, but, you can see on this slide some of the other things we cover in that program. So we'd love to talk to you about the possibility of attending this program. It's public. It's in Greensboro, North Carolina, but of course we can bring it to you if you have a sales leadership team large enough. So that being said, we really appreciate you spending time with us today. I'm looking at the clock. We did go over by about 46 seconds. So we'll see you next time. Thanks.